there, Year 10, and welcome to the last subtopic on the Germany paper. We've looked at 6 so far. The 7th and final topic is Hitler's foreign policy. Foreign policy means any rules or issues that are to do with other countries that a leader has to deal with. They call rules to do with your own country domestic policy, rules to do with other countries foreign policy. Now, this is a really important topic for Hitler and Germany because we know that eventually Hitler is going to begin another world war, and that's going to involve lots of other countries. So what we're going to look at today is what were his aims, what did he want to achieve with other countries, and we're going to look at how he kind of went about doing that. And then the next lesson is going to be more about what did he do that led to World War II. Okay, so you should have a brand new booklet with you now. I've emailed it out to you all. It's also on SharePoint if you go to Year 10 History, and if you go to the Booklets tab, it's there for you to download as well. You can choose how you do it. You can print it off and do it by hand, or you can do it on the computer. With this booklet, I would probably go more down the route of printing it off by hand, only because there is a 2-page timeline that I've done, and I originally did it on Publisher, and when I transferred it to Word, it was really hard to turn it. They didn't want it to be landscape. So it might be a bit dodgy for you to type on that because obviously it's tilted to a different side. I mean, you can have a go and see how it goes, but I think that's going to be a bit of a pain for people that want to do it on the computer. So I do apologise about that. If you need a paper copy and you haven't got a printer, get in touch with me, message me, email me, or the school, and we can put a booklet off for you and get that sent to your house. It will mean it's a bit slower, obviously, in getting to you, but you know, the summer holidays are around the corner, so you have the summer holidays to complete it, really. So let me know if you need a copy of the booklet by hand and you haven't got a printer. Okay, let's get going. Right, so as usual, the key questions to do with this topic are on the front of the booklet, and we'll answer those at the end once we filled everything in. Okay, first page, there is a box at the top of your page that says what were Hitler's foreign policy aims. I'm going to put 5 images up on the board, and they represent the 5 things that Hitler wants to achieve that are to do with other countries. You have a good grasp of what Hitler wants and what Hitler hates. So hopefully you'll be able to work out what these symbols represent. And don't worry, I will give you the answers as well if we get stuck. So what is foreign policy? Foreign policy is a government's strategy for dealing with other nations. We've already kind of talked about that. I thought this kind of political cartoon was quite good at showing you the current president of America's foreign policy, that every other country seems to be the enemy of America, and he kind of wants to, well, I don't want to be as blunt as say bomb every other country, because that's kind of putting it a bit simply, but you know what he's like. Anyway. Okay, these are the 5 foreign policy strategies or aims that Hitler wants to achieve. What do you think each of these symbols represent? So I'll just go quiet for a little bit so you can have a think. If you need more time, please pause the clip. And then I'm going to tell you what they are, and we're going to write a bullet point list. So some of them might be recognisable to you and some of them might not. It was quite hard to find symbols for each of them. I bet the one that you recognise is probably Lebensraum, maybe. Do you remember that from Year 9? Hitler really wanted something called Lebensraum. What was Lebensraum translated into English? Well, you can kind of see what it is on that cartoon there. In the cartoon, Hitler is reaching out across the globe and kind of like he's possessing other countries. Lebensraum was translated into living space. Hitler wanted more living space for the pure German race. He believed that Aryans were the superior race and they needed more space to live in. Germany had shrunk after World War I because they'd had to give a lot of their land away, so he felt like they didn't have enough space to live in. So what does he want to do? He wants to take over more countries in order to give Germans Lebensraum, living space. The other one you probably recognise was the other cartoon at the bottom, which is looks like a copy. It's got the word terms. German people must pay for all damage to civilians on land, sea, or from the air. So that looks like the word terms could be Treaty of Versailles, and it looks like that's the one that says they have to give money to France and Germany. So in that cartoon, I think that's a French soldier with his sword through the term, showing it to a German soldier. It's the Treaty of Versailles. It's supposed to represent the Treaty of Versailles and how France were pushing rules onto Germany that maybe were unfair. So one of the other things that Hitler wanted to achieve through foreign policy was essentially to get rid of the Treaty of Versailles so that Germany didn't have to follow the rules anymore. Another thing you might have recognised is the symbol for communism. You can see it in the top corner, better dead than red. The yellow kind of hammer and sickle symbol is the symbol of communism, and the big red kind of line through it is that they don't like communism. Red, if you were red, that's kind of like slang for you were a communist, because communists are represented by the colour red, which represents workers. Hitler was very anti-communist. He always has been, because they are the biggest threat to him. They're the ones that could potentially take him over if they wanted to. And also they scared him because they wanted to get rid of class and society and power. And Hitler likes power. He wants to keep hold of it. So he's afraid of communism. So one of his other aims was he wanted to get rid of it, not just in Germany, but around the world. So it wasn't no longer a threat. You might recognise the map at the bottom corner. It's of Austria-Hungary. It's a bit all in yellow. So Austria-Hungary used to own other countries like Czechoslovakia and places like that, but also Germany did. Germany used to own part of Czechoslovakia too, and Germany used to be really close friends with Austria-Hungary. Now, one of the rules of the Treaty of Versailles was that they were no longer allowed to be allies. So one of the things Hitler wants to do in terms of foreign policy is be friends with Austria-Hungary again and own some of the land that he'd lost after World War I. And then I tried to find one that represents, in that top corner, his other aim, which is to unite all German-speaking people. So we've got two people kind of speaking German there, shaking hands. Again, it's to do with World War I and the Treaty of Versailles and the fact that Germany lost a lot of land. So there's a lot of people living in Europe that used to be part of the German Empire, so they speak German. So for example, in Austria, in Czechoslovakia, there are people that speak German. And Hitler believed that they should all be brought together. And if that meant taking over that land and making it part of Germany, then that's a good thing in his opinion. It's justified because it used to belong to Germany, and it's justified because those people speak German. So why shouldn't they be part of the German country or empire? So those are his 5 aims. Okay, listen carefully and you can get them down in that box there. Number 1, he wants to unite all German-speaking people. Number 2, he wants Lebensraum, living space, for the pure Germans. Number 3, he wants to end communism. Number 4, he wants to unite with Austria again. And number 5, he wants to reverse or get rid of the Treaty of Versailles. Those are the 5 things that Hitler wants to achieve, and they're to do with foreign policy because they're all to do with other countries taking them over, not following their rules, and so on. So in order to understand foreign policy, it's important that you have a grasp of what Europe looked like at that time. Which countries were the most important in terms of relation to Germany, and where are they geographically on the map? So our next task, on the same first page, I've got a blank map of Europe in 2030s. Okay. On the map, there's no labelling, and it's been left white, so it's nice and easy to write on. I have got a little box with a list of countries that are important at this time and linked to Germany. I would like you please to work out where you should put them on the map. Now, you cannot look at a modern map to help you, because Europe does not look the same today as it did in the 1920s and 30s, and that's because after World War II things change a lot. Some of them you should be able to do. I hope that you'd be able to tell me where Germany is, United Kingdom, Spain, Italy and France. The others are slightly more difficult: Belgium, Austria, Greece, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary and the USSR, which is we would probably know as Russia rather than the USSR. It's called the USSR at this time because the communists have taken it over after World War I, and it's now called the United Soviet State of Russia. Soviet is what you would call a communist. So it's a communist country at that time. If there should be space for you to write it on the country. If not, write it nearby and do an arrow pointing towards it. My two top tips. Austria, remember, used to be very close to Germany, and Czechoslovakia looks like a worm, if that helps. That's how I remember those countries. Pause this video so that you can fill this in, and then I'm going to show you a map on the next slide so that you can check your answers, correct any mistakes. Okay, let's have a look at the answers. There we go. Hopefully you got that. Oh, the Czechoslovakia isn't very clear on there, but can you see how it says Slav? And it's got like lines in it. So that wiggly worm that was going into Germany from Austria-Hungary, that's Czechoslovakia. Below it where it says Hungary, that's Austria-Hungary or Austria at that time. Austria-Hungary doesn't exist anymore, it's now Austria-Hungary. No, hang on. This map isn't brilliant. Right, so Hungary's Hungary. Right next to Hungary though, so on your map, it's underneath Germany and Czechoslovakia, that's Austria. So actually it's been taken over by Germany on this map here, because it's 1939, sorry, this map. So I do apologise. So that, you can't see it on the map because it's just grey Germany, but right next to Hungary, underneath Germany and Czechoslovakia, that should be Austria. Okay. Everything else should be straightforward: Belgium, Italy, Greece, USSR. Oh, Poland, hopefully. Again, it's been cut in half by Germany here, but the whole of that, so it should be the country between Germany and the USSR. That is Poland. Okay. So sorry, that map isn't actually that good for checking the answers. If you need your answers checked, if you just type in a map of Europe, 1930s, make sure it's before 1939, it should show you. All right. Yeah, and then Hungary's that one. Belgium's the little one. Hopefully you knew where the Germany, Britain, and all France and Spain are. That hasn't changed at least. Okay, let's look at the next page then. The next page is a timeline. You've got 2 pages of timeline that I want you to fill in today. What I've done is I've created this timeline for you because there's going to be lots of little meetings and conferences and events that we're going to look at that Hitler gets involved in because he wants to achieve one of those 5 aims: Lebensraum, ending communism, reversing the Treaty of Versailles, and so on. And it gets a little bit bitty. So rather than you taking loads and loads of notes, what I've done is I've created a timeline from the 1930s to 1939, and on it I've picked out the key moments. I've shown you what year they take place, and I've asked you some questions so that you can take basic notes. Okay. All of these, as I said, are things that Hitler did in order to achieve his aims of foreign policy. What it might be good to do to make this clearer to you once you finish is to colour code each box so that you can see if they meet a different foreign policy aim. So you could say anything to do with reversing the Treaty of Versailles. I'm going to just do a little highlight box around it in yellow or something like that. Yeah? Okay, so we've got things like the Disarmament Conference, the Non-Aggression Pact, Anschluss, Rhineland. So there's a lot going on here. What I'm going to do is put them up in bullet point note form on each slide so you can just pause it and take notes, or you can listen to me speak, and then I'll give you a chance to find the right place on the timeline for you to write your notes, and then we'll move on to the next event with the next slide, and so on and so on. Okay? Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is the first box. It's the Disarmament Conference from 1932 to 34. In 1932, 60 nations met to discuss ways their countries might disarm. Disarm means to get rid of your weapons and so reduce the chance of a war. The conference failed because France and Germany couldn't agree. This is not surprising because there was big beef between France and Germany. Germany tried to invade France in World War I, completely decimated the country. That's where all the trenches were. You have all villages completely destroyed, people killed for no reason. So France had a lot of beef against Germany. Germany have a lot of beef against France because they have to give them money every month in reparation payments. Germany wanted every country to agree to disarm to the lowest level, just like they had been made to do. So Germany kind of kick up a little bit of a fuss, but they say this is dignified because we were told we weren't allowed an army of 100,000 after World War I. So shouldn't you all be the same? And you are only allowed an army of 100,000, and then no one is a threat to each other and we're all equal. France refused this. So Hitler used that as an excuse to withdraw from the conference, and he went and started to rearm Germany. Clever. Hitler knew this would happen. Hitler knew when he went to this conference and said you should all have an army of 100,000 like us, that people wouldn't agree, especially France. And he knew that he could then use that as an excuse to say, well, if you're not going to disarm to 100,000, then neither is Germany. I'm going to go home and start to build up my army. Which is exactly what he was always going to do anyway, but now he's got an excuse. So in 1933, Hitler announced that the German army would start to rearm to 300,000, and nobody stopped him. In October 1939, Hitler withdrew Germany from the League of Nations so that nobody could tell him or question him and say, oh look, hang on, what are you doing? That's wrong. He's left the meeting, he's left the gang, he's left the alliance. He can now do what he wants. This is helping Hitler do one of his foreign policy aims, which is to reverse the Treaty of Versailles. He's reversing the rule that Germany should have a small army. Okay, so go to that part of the table now for me. Describe the Disarmament Conference of 1932. So it's not a lot of space because I don't think you need a lot to say really. So you might want to say something like 60 countries met together to agree to disarm. Germany said everybody should disarm to their level. France disagreed, so Hitler used it as an excuse to withdraw. How's this going to help Hitler? He now has reason to start to build up his army again. Something like that. So pause the video if you want to spend time doing that. Otherwise I'm going to move on, otherwise this video is going to be massive. Next one. Underneath it says the Non-Aggression Pact. Hitler had showed that he had peaceful intentions by signing a non-aggression pact with Poland in 1934. Non-aggression suggests that they're not going to fight one another. He said by signing this that he accepted the borders of Poland. So remember that map that you just did? Poland and Germany are neighbours. Bits of Poland used to belong to Germany before World War I. But Hitler is saying, that's cool. Poland can keep its borders, even though before the Treaty of Versailles, bits of that was German. It encouraged trade between the two countries. The pact was supposed to last 10 years, and France also had the same pact with Poland. Okay, so on that table, please, can you describe the non-aggression pact Hitler signed with Poland? And can you tell me how that's going to help Hitler? So you could say it was an agreement that Hitler wouldn't fight Poland and let Poland keep its borders. How's that going to help him? It's going to make him look really peaceful, isn't it? It's going to make Poland trust him. It's going to mean that they can trade with one another. Again, pause the clip if you need time, otherwise I'm going to move on. Okay, so go to the box below. It says, describe the first attempt at Anschluss in 1934. Anschluss is a very strange sounding word. It's a German word and it describes the unification of Austria with Germany. So if you say Hitler wanted Anschluss, it means Hitler wanted to unite with Austria. Okay. It says first attempt. There's going to be 2 attempts at Anschluss, 2 attempts to unite with Austria. This is the first one. So Hitler had been born in Austria and saw a union with Austria as a very natural thing. They were neighbours after all. On coming to power, he encouraged the Nazi Party in Austria to protest and say, we want to unite with Germany. The Austrian Chancellor at the time, a man called Dollfuss, was determined to maintain Austrian independence and so banned the Austrian Nazi Party. Hitler's not going to like that. So the Austrian Nazi Party retaliated by taking over the radio and broadcasting that Dollfuss had resigned. They then assassinated Dollfuss, so they murdered him. This attempt failed, however, because Hitler failed to support it all the way to the end. At the time, Hitler wants to be best friends with the leader of Italy, a man called Mussolini. Italy had ties to Austria, so Hitler did not want to fall out with the leader of Italy, Mussolini, over this. So what happened? All of this is kicking off in Austria. The Nazis taking over the radio, assassinating the leader, and they're kind of looking to Hitler to go, what do we do next? Should we take over? Are you going to come to Austria and take over for us? And then Mussolini is like, what's going on in Austria? Are your Nazis causing trouble? So Hitler has to decide, do I take sides with the Nazis in Austria or do I take sides with my new friend Mussolini and be friends with Italy? And he decides to go for Mussolini. And he says, I don't know. They're rebels. I haven't told them to do this. I'll tell them to stop. We'll try and put this rebellion down. So he does. So Anschluss fails, but Hitler hasn't forgotten about it. So he's thinking to himself, that didn't work that time. I'll try again later when the moment is right. So, describe the first attempt at Anschluss. You're essentially getting those bullet points down in that box. Okay? Pause this so you've got time to do that because I'm going to move on. Okay, return of the Saarland. Is this a box? This isn't a box, okay? But it's worth, so you'd have to take notes on it, but it's worth reading. So the Saarland is an area that had been controlled by the League of Nations, and it's right next to Germany, since 1920. But in 1935, the Saarland actually held a very decent vote. Nobody was messing with it, nobody was forcing them, and they actually voted that they wanted to join with Germany. The democratic joining of the Saar to Germany showed Hitler that there was some support for his ideas of bringing all Germans into one nation. Where should we put this on your diagram? I mean, you could fit it somewhere near 1935, but I haven't done a box for it because it's such a small thing. It could just be something that you'd make a note of or something that you try and remember in the future. There was an example of a country that volunteered to be part of Germany and Hitler didn't have to force them. Yeah. Okay, rearmament and conscription. So we're looking at the top box. How did Hitler rearm during 1935? In 1935, conscription was introduced. Conscription means when you kind of say that a certain group of people have to start joining the army. It's usually young, fit men. So there was an army called the Wehrmacht, I think is how it's pronounced. The Navy, which was called the something Reich, which I can't remember, and the Air Force, which was called the Luftwaffe. So it used to be that Germany only had an army of 100,000 and that was it. Now they've got an army, a navy and an air force. And he's doing this all openly. He's not keeping it a secret and nobody's doing anything about it. It created jobs. For example, factories started making weapons and tanks. Tanks called panzer divisions were built to help with this tactic called blitzkrieg. I don't know if you remember that from year 9. Very famous German tactic of invading other countries. Blitzkrieg means lightning war. So they would literally come in really fast, hit you really hard, and then leave having complete control of that land. And they do it through stages. So they'd kind of drop people behind the enemy lines and cut all your communication, like telephone wires. They'd then spy for your weak spots. They'd then bomb you. They'd then send tanks in. They'd then send soldiers in. They'd then send the police in to kind of keep control. They'd then drop propaganda from the sky to kind of make sure that there's no rebellions and that everybody gives in. And they'd move on to the next country. To do that, they have to have a very strong tank division. So this panzer division was very important and quite threatening to other countries. Hitler said he was only doing it for self-defence, though. He wasn't planning on using them to attack, which is a lie. And to make it worse, the Anglo-German Naval Treaty was signed. Anglo means British, German means German. So it's going to be signed between the British and the Germans. And it allowed Germany to build a naval fleet, but only one that was 35% the size of Britain's. Britain had the biggest navy at that time. And it's almost like they're saying to Hitler, you can have a navy. I know that goes against the Treaty of Versailles, but we're going to allow it. Just make sure your navy is nowhere near as big as ours, so that if the time does come, and we don't trust you, and we may have to fight you, we know that we'll be able to beat you on the sea. It's the first example of Britain appeasing Hitler. Appeasing means giving in to his demands. They believed in giving in a little bit to Hitler, giving him a little bit of what he wanted and hoping that he would be satisfied with that and he wouldn't go any further. Whereas Hitler took it the other way. He says, well, they're giving me a little bit of what I wanted, so the next time I'm going to try harder and hopefully I'll still get what I want, which is kind of what ends up happening. Okay, so how did Germany rearm? Give me some examples of Germany building up their army, navy and air force. Talk about how they're using factories and stuff to make weapons, talk about their tank division, and also can you mention the Anglo-German Naval Treaty, please? So again, pause so that you can take notes in that box because I'm moving on. Right, the last box on that page is about the Rhineland. Now we've talked about the Rhineland quite a lot since we started this subject. So I'm going to see how much you can remember. I've written a paragraph that tells you why the Rhineland was important and what Hitler did in the 1930s about the Rhineland, and I've left some words out. So you don't have to write this anywhere, you can just do this verbally now to yourself, and then I'm going to put the answers up on the next slide. So the Rhineland was a strip of land in Germany near the what border? What word would go in there? It had been blank under the Treaty of Versailles. Under the blank pact, signed by who in 1925, the Rhineland was to be kept in Allied hands. So the Rhineland was supposed to belong to Britain and France. The Allies withdrew in 1935, and the following year, Hitler moved to what it? Hitler devoted his entire resources to this, hoping that Britain and who would be too distracted by the Abyssinian crisis to challenge him. Their forces were far superior, but they did not oppose. This gave Hitler the blank he needed to push on with his policy aims. Think about what words would go in there, pause it if you need to, and I'll put the answers up on the next slide, and then we'll decide what we're going to put in the box on the timeline. Okay, so the Rhineland was a strip of land near the French border. I hope you got that one because that was something we talked a lot about with the Treaty of Versailles. One of the rules of the Treaty of Versailles was that it had to be demilitarised, which means they weren't allowed to have an army there. And France really pushed for that because it was so close to their border. They didn't want Germany to have an army there. Right, this one was quite hard. Under the Locarno Pact, which was signed by Gustav Stresemann in 1925, the Rhineland was to be kept in Allied hands. So I don't know if you remember the Locarno Pact. I've talked about that with a couple of you last week when you were in school. The Locarno Pact was the pact signed with lots of other countries where they all agreed that they would keep their borders, so nobody had to stress about people invading. So one of those was that the Rhineland was actually not going to be part of Germany, it was going to be part of France and Britain. But in 1935, the Allies withdrew. and Hitler moved to reoccupy the Rhineland, denouncing the Locarno Pact. Hitler devoted his entire resources to this, so he's only just started building up his army, and he sends all of them to the Rhineland to take it over. He hoped that Britain and France would be too distracted. There was something called the Abyssinian Crisis going on. It's kind of like Africa, Italy. It's okay, we don't need to know about it, but it's a bit like Britain and France had their backs turned, weren't looking at the Rhineland. By the time they turned back around, Hitler had taken it over. However, Britain and France's forces were far superior, but they didn't oppose Hitler. Hitler even said, if France and Britain had come into the Rhineland and kicked me out, I would have had to have retreated, and it would have been a massive blow, and it would have been really embarrassing for him. But they didn't. They let him get away with it again. And this gave Hitler the confidence he needed to then push on with the other things that he wanted to achieve. So he got the Rhineland, this tiny strip of land. Now he wants to start taking over bigger countries. Okay, decide what you want to put. So in the Rhineland it says, where is it? It's near the French border, but it's still in Germany. Why is the Rhineland an important place? How did Hitler invade in 1935? So I'd say it's important because it's close to France. It's important because it used to belong to Germany, now it doesn't. How did Hitler invade? So you want to say the Allies withdrew in 1935 and Hitler went to reoccupy it. France and Britain could have kicked him out, but they let him get away with it, and that gives him the confidence to stay there and then start to take over other countries. Okay, so put that in the Rhineland box. And then when you're ready, turn your page over in your booklet, and you've got your second page of timeline. Okay, so that should all be finished now. Let's move on to the second page. The second page is all about alliances that Hitler made. Now, that's quite a lot of work. If you want to have a little bit of a break and go away and make yourself some food and drink, or go and sit outside, or do another subject, then that could be good, and then come back to this video when you're ready. Or if you're like, no, I'm in the zone, let's keep going. This one shouldn't take as long. Okay. So far, what has Hitler managed to achieve? Has he achieved Anschluss yet? He hasn't, has he? Because it failed. Has he started to unite German-speaking people? Well, the Saarland voted to be a part of it, so he has there. Has he destroyed communism yet? No. Has he reversed the Treaty of Versailles? Yes, he has. He's started to build up the army again. He's got the Rhineland back. Has he got Lebensraum yet? I mean, a little bit with the Rhineland, I suppose, but there's not really living space being created, is there? There's nowhere for the Germans to live. So hopefully, by the end of this lesson, he'll have achieved more of his aims. Don't worry, you don't have to fill anything in yet. Right, Mussolini. We mentioned Mussolini a little bit last time. I've got some information about him here. There is a box on your timeline that's got kind of little dots around it, and it says Mussolini, job, beliefs, importance. So I'm going to read through the notes of Mussolini. You're going to tell me what his job was, what did he believe in, and why is he an important figure. Yes, that really is him in the GIF. He was famous for being quite over the top with his gestures and things like that, a little bit like Hitler. Okay, Benito Mussolini was the 40th Prime Minister of Italy, but he later became a dictator. He completely took over. He banned all other political parties like Hitler did, and he became the only leader of Italy. And he had a name, like Hitler called himself Führer, and now I can't remember what it was. Anyway, he was a politician, he was a journalist, and he ended up being the leader of his political party, which was called the National Fascist Party, between 1922 and 1943. So Hitler was the leader of the Nazi Party, Mussolini was the leader of the Fascist Party. A fascist believes that there should only be one ruler and one way of thinking. This will ultimately lead to a dictatorship. So lots of people call Hitler a fascist because he believed that there should only be one ruler and one way of thinking, which was the Nazi way. Mussolini was very similar. Mussolini promised his people he would build Italy back up to the glory days of Rome, so the Roman Empire. And that's what he believed in, and that's what his fascist idea was. Very like Hitler. Hitler thought Germany was the best and deserved to have a bigger place in the world. Mussolini thought the same about Italy. He was like, we used to be the biggest empire in the world. We used to be the Roman Empire. Now look at us. I'm going to build Italy back up again. He wasn't as anti-Semitic, as anti-Jewish as Hitler was. However, when he became friends with Hitler in the 1930s, to appease Hitler, to get on with Hitler, he did start to kind of copy him in terms of getting Jews into concentration camps and things like that later on. He wasn't a very successful leader. He made poor decisions during World War II. Famine and hunger was common in Italy. So in 1945, after World War II, and Hitler lost, his people executed him. Now he was in hiding, and they discovered him, and they publicly hung him in a square. And rumour is they hung his body upside down, and people queued up to spit on it as a very public kind of, we hated you, we didn't want you as our leader. And this is very really affects Hitler, and is one of the reasons why he has his body burnt when he shoots himself, because he doesn't want, he knows that the people of Germany have turned against him by that point, and he doesn't want what happened to Mussolini to happen to him. So that's why we never got to see Hitler's body, because he was very keen on completely getting rid of it so that nobody could do anything to it. Okay, Mussolini, so job. He is the leader of Italy. What does he believe? He believes in fascism. He believes in one ruler, one way of thinking. He believes that he can build Italy back up to the glory days of Rome. Why is he important? Because he's going to be allies with Hitler. Because he also inspired Hitler. So he was around before, he became a leader before Hitler did. And Hitler used a lot of his tactics of bullying, banning other political parties. Mussolini had his own private army called the Black Shirts, so they would wear black shirts. Hitler literally copied that with the SA and called them the brown shirts instead. So he is an important influence on Hitler. So fill in that box for me. Okay, let's look at some alliances then that strengthened Germany. So Hitler's going to make alliances with kind of three key people. If you look at your timeline, the 4 boxes on the top are the 4 pacts that he signs with various countries. Okay, so we're going to look at those on various slides. Okay, so in 1936, Germany and Italy sign a pact called the Rome-Berlin Axis. That's hopefully easy to remember because Rome is the capital of Italy, Berlin is the capital of Germany. So if you see the Rome-Berlin Axis, it should be the alliance between Italy and Germany. They agreed that both countries would follow a similar foreign policy, so they would deal with countries in a similar way, and mainly they wanted to end communism in Europe. So on the timeline it says, and no, we're not looking for anti-communism, it says Rome-Berlin Axis, which is the second box. Who signed it? Germany and Italy. Or you can be very clever and say Hitler and Mussolini. And what was the aim? They both wanted to follow similar foreign policies and end communism. The next one is Hitler making an alliance with Japan in 1936. This alliance was called the Anti-Comintern Pact, and its aim was also to stop communism from influencing the world. It does influence Japan quite a lot. Japan is obviously in Asia, and it's close to countries like China, who is a very, very big, strong communist country at this time. So Anti-Comintern, which is the first box, who signed it? Japan and Germany. What is the aim? To stop communism from spreading. Mussolini also signs the pact in 1937. I'm going to sneeze, sorry. Okay, no, I'm not. Okay, so we've done the first two boxes, anti-Comintern, Rome, Berlin. We haven't done Nazi-Soviet or Pact of Steel yet. Okay, big box at the bottom says, describe the second attempt at Anschluss in 1936. 38. I might have got it wrong on the timeline. If I have, let's just check on the notes, but just do the arrow pointing towards 1938 and get rid of 1936. Let's see. I'm either wrong on the PowerPoint or I'm wrong on the timeline. Let's see. Now, if we were in class, we'd have got the textbooks out and read pages 80 to 81 because there's quite a lot to talk about. But we aren't, so I've taken pictures of them so that you can see, and I'll put them on the next slide. All right. Okay, so let's go through the events and then let's decide what we're going to put in the notes in the box. It is 1938, so I did get it wrong on the timeline, sorry. Okay, so remember, Hitler has already encouraged the Nazi Party to stir up trouble in the past, so he does the exact same thing. In January 1938, Hitler began to step up his campaign by ordering Austrian Nazis to stop bombing public buildings and staging mass parades. So again, he says, start some chaos, start protesting. In the next month, Hitler invited the Austrian Chancellor, a man called Schuschnigg, to Germany to discuss this chaos. The Chancellor was bullied into accepting 2 Austrian Nazis as members of his government, and he also had to accept closer economic ties with Germany. On his return to Vienna, which is the capital of Austria, Schuschnigg decided to hold a plebiscite, which is a vote, to allow the Austrians to vote on the future of their country. It's a bit like Brexit. So chaos is happening. Nazis are kicking off saying, we want to unite with Germany. So Hitler goes, oh, I'll invite the leader of Austria over and I'll basically bully him into saying that he should start to unite with Austria. Schuschnigg is a little bit more clever than that. So when he comes back, he thinks to himself, well, I'm never going to be able to say no to Hitler, but maybe I could get people to vote. And once they vote, they might vote no, and then Hitler can't argue with that. So Hitler, fearing a vote against him, decided to act quickly. He threatened invasion and continued to bully Schuschnigg. Schuschnigg resigned on the 12th of March 1938 and was replaced by the leader of the Austrian Nazi Party. The new leader then asked Hitler to send troops to restore order, in quote marks, because really Hitler didn't need to. There was no chaos. Hitler had created the chaos. German troops marched into Austria in 1938 and Anschluss was proclaimed the next day. Because a vote had been promised, the next month, under the watchful eye of Nazi troops, 99.75% of Austrians voted in favour of Anschluss. They voted to join Germany. Well, of course you would, if you've got the whole German army and Nazi troops parading through the streets. Apparently they were stood over the voting box, literally with a gun, like, are you voting to join with Germany? You better be, otherwise we're going to arrest you and take you away and you'll never see your family again. So of course 99.75% of people voted. But then because they voted, Hitler could claim that this was peaceful. We took over Austria, they voted for it, everything is good. When really he created a fake protest so that he had to send in the German army to pretend to keep the peace. But it was all a pretense. So I would start with, in January 1938, Hitler asks the Austrian Nazis to start to create chaos. I talk about the Chancellor trying to get around it by holding a vote. I then talk about Hitler sending the army in, Hitler putting pressure on the leader of Austria to resign, then replacing him with a Nazi, who then asks Germany to come in with the army to keep the peace. I'd then say that Anschluss was proclaimed on the 13th of March and then confirmed with people voting a month later. Okay, so I would pause this. If you'd rather just get all that, the stuff that's in the flowchart down, but it is an awful lot of writing, so I put it into your own words. Okay, so pause this so that you can make notes, otherwise I'm going to move on. Okay, nearly there. Last big box, the Sudetenland Crisis. Hopefully this will ring a bell. Hopefully this will be something that you remember from year 9. Again, if we were in lessons, we'd be reading the textbooks, but we're not, so I'm going to put up the appropriate bits on the next slide. So it says, describe the Sudetenland Crisis of 1938. Think about why Hitler wants the Sudetenland, what does he threaten to do, and how does he get it? And then it says on the box, describe Hitler's invasion of Czechoslovakia. Let's not worry about that right yet. But that map is key. So this is Germany at the time, big bits in yellow. Can you see the bit that's red and next to France? That's the Rhineland. It used to belong to Germany, now they've taken it back. You've got an area next to Poland that used to belong to Germany but belongs to Poland at the moment. And you've got Czechoslovakia, which is the worm, and then you've got this area of red around Czechoslovakia. That is the Sudetenland. It is part of Czechoslovakia, but it's red on the map because it used to belong to Germany. Okay? Right, so from April 1938, Hitler ordered Heinlein, who is the leader of the Sudetenland Nazi Party, to stir up trouble in the area. So it's exactly like Anschluss with Austria. He says, right, Nazis who live there, stir up some trouble and say that you want to be part of Germany, and then I can come in and kind of deal with it. Yeah. So because of the crisis, Hitler said he would support the Sudeten Germans with military force if they needed him to. The Czechs knew that to surrender the Sudetenland would make them defenceless against Germany. They knew that if they gave up the Sudetenland, Germany would probably then invade them. All their defences against Germany were in that area. They also had an alliance with France and believed that France would support them if they needed them to. The crisis worsened in the summer of 1938, and Neville Chamberlain, Prime Minister of Britain, intervened. The failure of the League of Nations meant that someone had to try and forge a peaceful solution. Chamberlain saw himself as the person to bring the Sudetenland crisis to an end. He felt that he could persuade Hitler to accept a compromise, and he worked tirelessly in September to avoid a war. He attended 3 key meetings in September, and for much of the month, war seemed a very likely outcome. So let's think about let's look at the 3 things that Britain tried to do to stop Hitler taking the Sudetenland. 15th of September, Hitler demanded the Sudetenland and threatened war if he didn't get it. Chamberlain offered to discuss the transfer of those areas which had a lot of Germans in them. The Czechs had little choice but to agree. 22nd, Hitler increased his demands and said land should also be given to Poland and Hungary. There were Polish and Hungarians in the Sudetenland as well. He demanded that lands be surrendered by the 1st of October or there would be a war. Britain and France rejected the demands. They said no to Hitler. And finally, on the 29th of September, Chamberlain, Hitler, Daladier, who was the Prime Minister of France, and Mussolini, who was the leader of Italy, met in a last bid to keep the peace. Bonnet, who was the leader of Czechoslovakia, was not invited to the talks. It was agreed that the Sudetenland would be occupied by German troops. Poland and Hungary would also get parts of Czechoslovakia. So in the end, after all that negotiating, Germany got exactly what they wanted, and Britain gave in. The Sudetenland was given to Germany and Poland and Hungary to all share out. The deal was, however, that if Hitler got this, he would not take over Czechoslovakia. That was key to the agreement. So describe the Sudetenland crisis. I'd talk about why Hitler wants the Sudetenland. So I'd say that he wants the Sudetenland because it used to belong to Germany. It's got German-speaking people in it. I then talk about him making demands and saying if Czechoslovakia didn't give him the Sudetenland, that he would declare war. I talk about Britain getting involved to negotiate this, and then I talk about how it ended with Germany getting the Sudetenland, but the promise was that they wouldn't take over Czechoslovakia. I think that's pretty much what it says on that one, to be honest with you. Okay, and then on the same box, you've got describe Hitler's invasion of Czechoslovakia. And I've got it as 1938 on the timeline, but I think it's 1939. Right, Hitler wanted the rest of Czechoslovakia, so he's been given the Sudetenland. He promised that he wouldn't take over Czechoslovakia, but he wants it. He has been given what he wanted in the past, so in his head, Hitler's thinking, I can do this. He caused panic in the country by threatening to invade. Then he sent troops into Czechoslovakia to again pretend that he's restoring the order. So this is kind of like a trick that he always pulls. Create chaos and then pretend that you're going to solve that chaos by sending troops in, and then your troops never leave, they take over. Hitler had taken over Czechoslovakia by international law, but Britain and France did not approve and felt deceived, but they did nothing. Okay, so describe Hitler's invasion of Czechoslovakia. I'd say that he threatened to invade and caused a panic, and then he sent in troops to pretend to keep the peace, and that Britain and France did nothing, even though he was going against the Munich Conference agreement, where he said that if he had the Sudetenland, he wouldn't take over Czechoslovakia. And then we've got one more box left, which is the Pact of Steel, which is the top box on the timeline, which is another alliance. So Hitler planned to invade Poland one day, but he knew he needed allies. In May 1939, Hitler and Mussolini signed the Pact of Steel, which turned their friendship into a full military alliance. So instead of saying we're friends, we agree to do the same things and not fight one another, it's now we are going to use each other's armies if we need them. They agreed to help each other out if they were ever under attack. Next, Hitler would try to be allies with the USSR. Oh no, I've gone too far and it won't let me go back. Okay, so Pact of Steel. Who signed it? Italy and Germany, or Hitler and Mussolini. What was the aim? The aim was to join their militaries together and help one another if they were ever under attack. And also Hitler's secret aim was to take over Poland one day, and I think he wanted to use Italy's army to help him take over Poland. So make sure you've got that as well. And then we've got the Nazi-Soviet Pact, and then we are done with this timeline. Now, we could read page 86, but I think you can work out a little bit of this on your own. If it's called the Nazi-Soviet Pact, who do you think were the two countries that signed it? Nazi implies Germany, and Soviet implies the USSR, the United Soviet State of Russia. So it's the USSR and Germany. It's Hitler and Stalin. Joseph Stalin is the leader of the USSR in the 1930s. Why is this so unusual that Hitler is signing a treaty, a pact with Soviet Russia and Joseph Stalin? It's unusual because one of Hitler's foreign policy aims is to get rid of communism, and the USSR is a big, big, big communist country. It's very unusual that they're signing this pact together. So why does he do it? As negotiations between Britain and the Soviet Union stalled in August, instead Russia began to have talks with Germany. The Nazi foreign minister met Molotov, his Soviet counterpart, and after 2 meetings in August, the Nazi-Soviet Pact was signed. The terms of the pact included the following. They agreed not to support any third country if it attacked the other. So Germany agreed that if Italy attacked Russia or the USSR, that Germany wouldn't agree with it, and they would say to Italy, oh, hang on, I'm friends with the USSR, don't attack them, and vice versa. Both agreed to consult each other on matters of common interest, and they promised not to join any other alliance if it was aimed at the other. Now that's a bit of a two-faced thing for Hitler, because he's already joined alliances with Japan and Italy to end communism, which would directly affect the USSR. They agreed secretly that they would both invade Poland. Poland is the country right in the middle of the USSR and Germany, so they agreed they would take Poland over together and then split it in half, and USSR would have one half and Germany would have the other. The Soviet Union was allowed to occupy the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. So above Poland are 3 tiny countries, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, so the agreement was that Russia or USSR could have those 3 countries. Hitler was pleased with the pact because it meant that he would not be faced with a war on 2 fronts. So he knows that he wants to take over Europe, so he knows he's going to go towards France and Britain. He doesn't want to have to fight with the USSR just yet. And he would be able to take large parts of Poland easily. So if he joined with the USSR, he could take over Poland. Moreover, the occupation of Poland took him actually closer to the Soviet Union for a future invasion. So Hitler is thinking long term, and he's thinking, if I can be friends with the USSR right now, then I can put them off, and eventually I do want to take over the USSR and end communism. But I just want to keep them at bay for now. I also am going to invade Poland with them, which means that I've got a base. Poland is right next to the USSR. Great base for me to then launch a future attack on the USSR. Stalin liked it because it allowed him to take parts of Poland, which would make a future invasion of the Soviet Union a little more difficult, and the pact removed any chance of 3 Western powers allying against them. So they both liked it because they knew that together they were stronger against Britain, France, and what were the other ones to be thinking of? Maybe the USA? I don't know. Okay, so who signed it? Germany and USSR. What was the aim? The aim was to take over Poland and share it between them. The aim was to be allies together against Britain, France and America. And Hitler's secret aim was to make the USSR happy so that he could then invade them in the future without them knowing. That was a lot, wasn't it? Yeah? Which is why I did it as that timeline for you, so that you have basically all the little bits and bobs you need all in one. So like I said, I would probably go through this timeline now, colour code it. So anything that's to do with being anti-communist, do it in one colour. Anything that's to do with uniting the German-speaking people, do it in one colour. Anything that's to do with Lebensraum in another colour. Anything to do with reversing the Treaty of Versailles in a colour. And anything to do with uniting with Austria, do that in another colour. Okay. Next time, what we're going to look at is, did Hitler achieve what he wanted, and how is he going to start a war? We're going to do that next week, because we've done quite a lot this week already. Okay. Lovely. So if you could complete the quiz that's on forms, just to show me that you've understood the notes that you've taken, that would be fab. That takes this video up to nearly an hour. So I hope that everything kind of sunk in. I'm sorry that I got 2 of the dates wrong on the timeline. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, Year 10. Good luck, and I'll see you next week for the last week before the summer holidays. Please make sure that you send me pictures of your booklets, that I know that you've done it. Thanks very much.